Have you ever picked up a passenger who paid you in cash, had a normal conversation, and then vanished from your app's history like they never existed? What would you do if you discovered that passenger had been dead for 15 years? And what does it mean when your phone shows you drove someone who couldn't possibly have been in your car, but you remember every word they said, every turn you took, every dollar they handed you? My name is Marcus Rivera, and I've been driving for Uber in Orlando for 4 years. 4 years of theme park tourists, late-night bar crowds, airport runs at dawn, and the endless stream of humanity that flows through this city. I thought I'd seen it all. Drunk passengers, rude passengers, ones who tried to steal, ones who tipped amazingly, ones who made me question why I ever started this job. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the ride I gave on October 23rd. Nothing prepared me for discovering that my passenger had died in 2008, or for what happened after I tried to understand how that was possible. Orlando is a city of transients. People come, people go, and most of them are just passing through on their way to somewhere more magical. I've driven thousands of passengers and I barely remember most of them. Faces blur together after a while. Conversations become white noise. You learn to be friendly, but detached. Present, but forgettable. It's a survival mechanism when you're spending 10 hours a day with strangers in your car. But some rides stick with you. Some passengers burrow into your memory and refuse to leave. Rachel Morrison was one of them. The request came through around 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was parked outside the premium outlets on Vineland, waiting for the shopping stragglers to need rides back to their hotels. The pickup location showed an address on Kirkman Road about 10 minutes away, a residential area, not particularly notable. The passenger name was Rachel M., 4.96 star rating, which is solid. No special requests, no destination entered yet. Standard stuff. I accepted and headed over. The address led me to an older apartment complex, the kind built in the 80s that's been maintained just well enough to stay rentable. Not run down, but definitely showing its age. Yellow streetlights cast everything in a sickly glow, and a few residents sat on balconies smoking and scrolling through their phones. I pulled into the parking lot and sent the standard message, "Here for Rachel." Then I waited. She emerged from a ground floor unit after about a minute. Mid-30s, I'd guess, with shoulder-length dark hair and a kind of timeless way of dressing. Jeans, a simple gray jacket, canvas sneakers. She carried a small purse and walked with purpose, but not urgency. Nothing about her seemed off or strange. She looked exactly like 10,000 other passengers I'd picked up. When she opened the back door and slid in, she smiled politely. "Hi, thanks for coming out here," she said. Her voice was soft, slightly hoarse, like she'd been talking all day or was getting over a cold. "No problem. Where are we headed?" "Lake Eola Park, the west side entrance. I know it's probably closed this late, but I just need to meet someone nearby." I entered the destination in the app, about 15 minutes away, right in downtown Orlando. The fare estimate showed $12. "Sounds good. You all set?" "Yes, thank you." I pulled out of the complex and headed toward Colonial Drive. The usual small talk started naturally. I asked if she was visiting or local, and she said she'd lived in Orlando for a long time but hadn't been to Lake Eola in years. Wanted to see how much it had changed. She asked how long I'd been driving, and I told her about starting 4 years ago after my warehouse job laid off half the staff. We talked about how expensive Orlando had gotten, how the city was barely recognizable compared to 10 years ago, all the tourist developments pushing out local businesses. Normal conversation. Comfortable even. She was easy to talk to in that way some passengers are. Engaged but not intrusive, asking follow-up questions, sharing little details about herself that made her feel real and present. She mentioned working in hospitality, said she'd burned out and was thinking about a career change. I told her about my wife Angela's job as a school teacher, how she was constantly dealing with budget cuts and impossible class sizes. Rachel said her sister had been a teacher before she passed away. There was genuine sadness in her voice when she said it, the kind of grief that sits permanently in your chest after losing someone close. We hit a red light at Colonial and Bumby, and I glanced in the rearview mirror. She was looking out the window, her expression distant. The streetlights illuminated her face in profile, and for just a moment, she looked insubstantial somehow, like a photograph instead of a person. But then the light changed. She turned back toward me, and the impression vanished. Just a tired woman taking a late-night ride downtown. "You okay back there?" I asked. "Yeah, sorry. Just thinking about my sister. Tonight's the anniversary of her death. 15 years. Doesn't feel like it's been that long." "I'm sorry for your loss, that's rough." "Thank you. We weren't on good terms when she died. Car accident, very sudden. I never got to apologize for our last fight. So every year on this date I go somewhere she loved and just sit for a while. Try to tell her the things I should have said." My throat tightened. I'd lost my brother 2 years ago to a heart attack at 39, and the weight of unfinished conversations still crushed me sometimes. I think she'd understand. The people we love, they know what's in our hearts even when we don't say it. Rachel smiled in the mirror, and there was real warmth in it. "I hope so. I really hope so." We arrived at Lake Eola around 11:50. The park was indeed closed, gates locked, but the perimeter sidewalk remained accessible. I pulled up to the west entrance where she'd requested. She reached into her purse and pulled out a $20 bill. "The app says 12, so this should cover it plus tip." "You don't have to tip cash, you can do it in the app after." "I prefer cash. Makes it feel more personal, you know? Like a real transaction between people instead of just data." I took the 20 and pulled $8 from my wallet to make change. She waved me off. "Keep it, you listened, and that matters. Thank you, Marcus." "You're welcome, Rachel. I hope you find some peace tonight." She got out, closed the door gently, and walked toward the lake. I watched her for a moment, this grieving woman approaching the dark water to commune with her dead sister, and felt that familiar ache of shared human sadness. Then I marked the trip complete in the app, pulled away from the curb, and headed back toward the tourist areas looking for another ride. The rest of the night was unremarkable. 2 hotel pickups, 1 airport run, a group of drunk guys from Tin Roof who tipped well and sang off-key the entire drive. I got home around 3 a.m., exhausted and ready to collapse. Angela was already asleep. I quietly counted my cash tips, including Rachel's $8 contribution, and set them on the dresser before falling into bed. The next morning I woke up around 11 and went through my usual routine. Coffee, check the news, review my previous night's earnings in the Uber app to make sure everything processed correctly. I scrolled through the trip history, checking the fares and tips. Airport run, $60. Hotel pickup, $18. Drunk guys from Tin Roof, $35 with a $15 tip added in the app. But the Lake Eola trip wasn't there. I scrolled back through thinking I'd missed it. Nothing. I went to the previous day, the day before that, checking each trip carefully. The Lake Eola fare simply didn't exist in my history, but I'd definitely driven there. I remembered the conversation, remembered Rachel's face in the mirror, remembered taking her $20 bill. I could picture the road exactly, Kirkman to Colonial to Bumby to downtown. The trip had happened. I pulled up my earnings summary. The total matched all the other trips I could see but was missing the $12 from Lake Eola. I checked my cash. The $8 tip was there on my dresser, part of the pile I'd counted. Physical evidence of a trip the app insisted never occurred. "Angela," I called out to the living room where my wife was grading papers. "Can you look at something weird for me?" She came into the bedroom, reading glasses perched on her nose. I showed her my phone. "I picked up a passenger last night, took her to Lake Eola, but the trip isn't showing up in my history, like it never happened." Angela frowned and scrolled through the app herself. "That's strange. Did you maybe forget to start the trip?" "No, I definitely started it. I remember because she didn't enter a destination initially, so I had to add Lake Eola after she got in. Could be a glitch. The app crashes sometimes, right?" Maybe it didn't save properly. Maybe. But it didn't feel right. I'd been driving for 4 years and had never had a trip just vanish from my history. Glitches happen, sure. GPS issues, app freezes, payment processing delays. But a completely erased trip? That was new. I decided to contact Uber support, expecting the usual runaround. I submitted a ticket explaining the situation, pickup location, destination, approximate time, passenger name. I included the fact that I'd received cash payment and completed the trip. Then I waited for the automated response telling me someone would investigate within 48 hours. The response came 3 hours later, faster than usual. But the message made my skin prickle. We have no record of a trip matching your description in your driver history. Additionally, we find no user account associated with the name and pickup location you provided. Please verify your information. If you believe you transported someone not using our platform, this may have been an unauthorized use of your vehicle for hire, which violates your insurance coverage and local regulations. I read it 3 times. No record of the trip, fine. That's why I'd contacted them. But no user account? That didn't make sense. Rachel M. had requested the ride through the app. I'd seen her name, her rating, everything. She hadn't flagged me down on the street. This was a legitimate app-generated request. I went back through my phone, checking notifications. Sometimes the app would send a text or email confirmation when you accept a ride. I searched my messages for anything from last night around 11:30. Nothing. No record of accepting the ride, no passenger details, no trip summary. It was like Rachel Morrison had never existed in my app at all, but she had existed. I'd spent 15 minutes with her. She'd told me about her dead sister, about their last fight, about coming to Lake Eola every year on the anniversary. Those weren't things I'd imagined. I had her cash tip sitting on my dresser as proof. I decided to try a different approach. I drove back to the apartment complex on Kirkman Road, the pickup location I remembered clearly. It was early afternoon now, the complex looking less ominous in daylight. I parked and walked to the ground floor unit I'd seen Rachel emerge from. The door had a small window with closed curtains and a metal number plate, 147. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder. Still nothing. I was about to leave when an older woman came out of Unit 149, eyeing me suspiciously. "Can I help you?" "Sorry, I'm looking for Rachel Morrison. I'm a rideshare driver. I picked her up here last night." The woman's expression shifted from suspicion to confusion. "Rachel Morrison? That name sounds familiar, but nobody by that name lives in 147. That unit's been empty for 3 months. Landlord's renovating before the next tenant moves in." "Empty? But I picked her up right here last night around 11:30. "You must have the wrong building, honey. Nobody's been in or out of that unit in weeks." I thanked her and walked back to my car, my mind racing. Wrong building? But I'd pulled up to exactly where the app directed me. I'd watched Rachel walk out of Unit 147. Unless I'd been so tired I'd misremembered. But no, I could see it clearly. The yellow door, the way she'd locked it behind her, the specific angle she'd walked toward my car. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at that empty unit, and felt the first real thread of fear work its way into my chest. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. I pulled out my phone and did what I should have done immediately. I Googled Rachel Morrison Orlando. The search results loaded, and my heart stopped. The first hit was an Orlando Sentinel article from October 23, 2008, 15 years ago to the day. The headline read, "Local teacher dies in Colonial Drive accident." I clicked through with trembling hands. The article described how Rachel Elizabeth Morrison, 34, a middle school English teacher, had died when her car was struck by a drunk driver on Colonial Drive near Bumby Avenue. She'd been pronounced dead at the scene. The article included a photo. It was her, the woman from my back seat. Same face, same dark hair, same soft features. Rachel Morrison, the passenger I'd driven to Lake Eola last night, had been dead for 15 years, had died at the exact intersection we'd driven through together, Colonial and Bumby. The red light where I'd glanced back and thought she looked insubstantial, like a photograph. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. This wasn't possible. Dead people don't request Uber rides. Dead people don't make conversation about career changes and expensive rent. Dead people don't hand you $20 bills and leave $8 in cash on your dresser. Except she had. All of those things had happened. I had physical evidence. I had memories. I had driven a dead woman to Lake Eola Park on the 15th anniversary of her death, and she'd told me she was going there to talk to her dead sister. Wait, her sister? Rachel had said her sister died in a car accident 15 years ago. But according to the article, Rachel was the one who'd died 15 years ago. She'd gotten the story backwards, as if she didn't realize she was the dead one. As if she thought she was still alive, still grieving someone else, still trying to make peace with unfinished conversations. I read through more search results, found Rachel's obituary, which mentioned she was survived by her sister Jennifer Morrison Keller and her parents. Found a Facebook memorial page that people still occasionally posted on, sharing memories of Ms. Morrison, the teacher who made Shakespeare fun, who stayed after school to help struggling students, who died too young with too much left to give. Found a local news follow-up from 2009 about the drunk driver receiving a 10-year sentence. And buried in the comments section of that article, I found something that made my blood run cold. A comment from someone claiming to be Rachel's sister Jennifer, posted 3 years ago. Rachel loved Lake Eola. We had our last fight there the week before she died. I said terrible things I can never take back. Every year on the anniversary, I go to the west entrance and sit by the water, hoping somehow she knows I'm sorry, hoping she's found peace. The west entrance, where Rachel had asked me to take her, where Jennifer went every year to apologize, where I'd dropped off a passenger who'd told me she was apologizing to her dead sister, when in reality, she was the dead sister waiting for an apology. I drove home in a daze, my mind trying and failing to construct a rational explanation. Mistaken identity? But the photo matched perfectly. Coincidence? Too many specific details aligned. Elaborate hoax? For what purpose? To trick a random Uber driver out of $12? The only explanation that fit all the facts was impossible. I had picked up the ghost of Rachel Morrison on the 15th anniversary of her death, driven her to the place where her sister came to apologize, and taken cash payment for the service. A ghost who didn't know she was a ghost, who thought she was still alive and grieving, who was trapped in some kind of loop trying to make peace with her sister. Angela found me sitting at the kitchen table staring at nothing. "Marcus, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." The phrase hit differently now. I showed her everything. The article, the obituary, the photo that matched my passenger perfectly. I explained about the missing trip, the empty apartment, the cash that shouldn't exist. She listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from skepticism to concern. "There has to be an explanation," she said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. "Like what? A woman who looks exactly like a dead teacher, has the same name, shows up at an abandoned apartment at the exact spot the app directed me, talks about her dead sister on the anniversary of the real Rachel's death and pays in cash that I'm holding right now? Angela, I drove a ghost. I know how that sounds, but I don't know what else it could be." We sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Angela spoke, her voice quiet. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. What can I do? Report it? To who? The Uber support team?" "Hey, one of your accounts belongs to a dead person, just wanted to give you a heads up." "The police?" "I'd like to report a supernatural ride request." "I'll sound insane." "Maybe you should just let it go. You gave someone something a ride. They paid you. Nobody got hurt. Maybe that's all there is to it." But I couldn't let it go. Over the next few days, I became obsessed with understanding what had happened. I researched ghost sightings, apparitions, residual hauntings. I read about people who die suddenly and don't realize they're dead, who continue their routines as if nothing has changed. I found dozens of stories from rideshare drivers claiming to have picked up ghost passengers, people who disappear from the car without opening doors, rides that vanish from app history, Passengers who leave items behind that turn out to belong to someone who died years ago. Most of these stories felt like urban legends or attention-seeking nonsense, but some had a ring of authenticity that resonated with my experience. Details too specific to be fabricated. The confusion about why the app doesn't recognize the trip. The way the passenger seems slightly out of sync with reality. The cash payment that feels significant somehow, like it's the only way to make the transaction real in both worlds. I started driving past Lake Eola on my regular routes, looking for Rachel even though I knew I wouldn't find her. I went to the west entrance several times, sat on the bench overlooking the water, tried to feel some connection to what had happened. But there was nothing. Just a park, closed at night, frequented by joggers during the day. Normal. Ordinary. No trace of the woman I'd driven there. 3 weeks after the ride, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simple. Thank you. I almost deleted it as spam, but something made me open it. The message was short. Marcus, I don't know if this will reach you or if you'll even remember me. I was the passenger you drove to Lake Eola on October 23rd. I wanted to thank you for listening that night, for being kind when I needed kindness. I've been confused for a long time, going through motions I don't fully understand, trying to fix something I can't quite remember breaking. But our conversation helped me see things more clearly. I think I understand now what happened. I think I know what I need to do. Thank you for being the bridge I needed. I hope you and Angela and your family are well. Don't be afraid of what you experienced. It was real, and it mattered. Sometimes the living and the dead need each other more than we realize. Take care. Rachel. My hands trembled as I read it. The email address was gibberish, a random string of letters and numbers at a generic domain. When I tried to reply, the message bounced back as undeliverable. The account didn't exist, but the email itself was real, sitting in my inbox, mentioning Angela by name, even though I'd never told Rachel my wife's name. Or had I? I couldn't remember anymore. The details of that night were becoming slippery, hard to hold on to. I showed the email to Angela. She read it twice, her face pale. She mentioned me. How does she know my name? I must have said it during the ride. I don't remember, but I must have. Marcus, you need to delete this. Delete the email, stop researching dead people, stop going to Lake Eola. This isn't healthy. Whatever happened, it's over now. She was right. I knew she was right, but I couldn't let it go that easily. I needed to understand the purpose of it all. Why had Rachel appeared to me specifically? Why that night? Why did her ghost manifest as an Uber passenger? I spent hours thinking about our conversation, trying to find meaning in her words. She'd talked about burning out from hospitality work, about needing a career change, but Rachel had been a teacher when she died. Why would her ghost misremember her profession? Unless it wasn't a misremembering, unless she was trying to tell me something about her state of being, serving others, exhausted, ready for something different, ready to move on. She'd mentioned her sister's death, the unfinished apology, but she'd gotten it backwards, made herself the living sister seeking forgiveness. Maybe that's how ghosts work. They carry the emotions and situations of their death but can't quite grasp their own role in the story. Rachel had died without reconciling with Jennifer, so she manifested as Jennifer seeking reconciliation, a mirror image of the truth. And she'd chosen the anniversary, October 23rd, the night when Jennifer came to Lake Eola to apologize, to sit by the water and hope Rachel could somehow hear her. Maybe that's when the veil was thinnest for Rachel, when her sister's grief opened a channel and Rachel could briefly exist in the world again. Could request a ride, have a conversation, make a connection with a living person who would listen. I'd been that person. Random chance, algorithmic matching, or something else. I'd been selected to drive Rachel to the place where her sister waited, to be the bridge, as she'd put it in her email. The connection between the living and the dead, the one who could see both sides even if just for 15 minutes. About a month after the ride, I was scrolling through local news and found an obituary for Jennifer Morrison Keller. She'd died peacefully in her sleep at age 50, surrounded by family. The obituary mentioned she was a retired teacher who devoted her life to education after her younger sister Rachel, also a teacher, had died tragically in 2008. It noted that Jennifer would be buried next to Rachel at Greenwood Cemetery. I don't know why, but I went to the funeral, stood in the back, a stranger among grieving family and colleagues, watched as they lowered Jennifer's casket into the ground beside her sister's headstone, and I felt something shift in the air, some subtle change in pressure or temperature that made me think of that night in my car when Rachel looked insubstantial in the streetlight. After the service, I approached Rachel's headstone. Simple granite, her name and dates, and an inscription. Beloved sister, devoted teacher, gone too soon. Someone had left fresh flowers, bright yellow sunflowers, cheerful and alive against the gray stone. I stood there for a long time, trying to find words for what I felt. Grief for two sisters who'd wasted their last days together in anger. Relief that they were reunited now. Confusion about my role in their story. Finally, I spoke quietly. Rachel, if you can hear me, I hope you found your sister. I hope you both found peace. Thank you for trusting me with your story. The wind picked up, scattering leaves across the cemetery. Nothing supernatural, nothing dramatic. Just wind and leaves and the quiet settling of earth around two caskets. But I felt like something had been completed. Some circuit closed, some message delivered, some debt paid that I didn't even know I'd owed. I never told Jennifer's family about the ride. What would I say? That I'd driven their deceased relative's ghost around Orlando? That Rachel had hired me through an app account that didn't exist to take her to the place her sister apologized every year? They wouldn't believe me. And even if they did, what comfort would it bring? Better to let them have their grief untainted by impossible stories. But I kept the $20 bill. I know that sounds strange, but I couldn't bring myself to spend it. It felt important somehow, like physical proof that the ride had happened, that Rachel had been real even if just for those 15 minutes. I put it in a frame with a small note. Not all passengers are what they seem. Some are just looking for one last ride home. It hangs in my office now, and whenever I see it, I think about that October night. About a woman who didn't know she was dead, trying to make peace with a sister who didn't know she was forgiven. About the strange intersections of life and death. The way grief can create channels between worlds. The possibility that consciousness persists in ways we don't understand. I still drive for Uber. Still pick up tourists and bar crowds and airport runs. Most rides are utterly forgettable. But sometimes I get a passenger who seems slightly off, slightly disconnected from the present moment, and I watch them carefully in the mirror, looking for that insubstantial quality Rachel had, that sense of being both present and absent simultaneously. So far, I haven't encountered another ghost. Maybe Rachel was unique. Maybe October 23rd, 2023 was a singular moment when the conditions aligned perfectly. The anniversary, the sister's grief, the algorithmic chance that sent the request to my phone. Or maybe I'm just not looking hard enough. Maybe our world is full of ghosts requesting rides, sending emails from non-existent accounts, paying in cash that shouldn't be possible, trying desperately to complete one last task before they can finally rest. If you're a rideshare driver, pay attention to your passengers, the ones who seem distant, confused about recent events, who insist on cash payment, the ones whose trips disappear from your history, whose accounts you can't find later, who know things they shouldn't know. Maybe they're glitches in the system. Maybe there's something else, and maybe, just maybe, they need you to be their bridge between worlds, their connection to something they've lost, their last chance to make peace before moving on. I don't regret driving Rachel that night. Whatever happened, whatever impossible thing manifested in my backseat, it was real and it mattered. She said so herself in that email I can't reply to from an account that doesn't exist. And if I'm being honest, the experience changed how I see death, made it less frightening somehow. If consciousness can persist enough to request an Uber ride, to have a conversation, to seek closure for old wounds, then maybe death isn't the end we think it is. Maybe it's just a different state of being, and sometimes the barriers between states get thin enough for connection. Angela still gets uncomfortable when I talk about it. Prefers I keep the story to myself, worries people will think I'm unstable or making things up for attention. And maybe I am. Maybe I experienced some kind of breakdown, hallucinated the whole thing, constructed an elaborate delusion to cope with stress. The rational part of my brain offers these explanations regularly, but I don't believe them. I know what I experienced. I have Rachel's cache, her email, the memory of her voice talking about her sister's death when she was the one who died. I have the synchronicity of dates, the empty apartment, the missing app record. Too many details align for it to be coincidence or delusion. So I choose to believe I drove a ghost. That Rachel Morrison requested one last ride 15 years after her death, and I was there to provide it. That our 15-minute conversation helped her understand what had happened and gave her the strength to finally let go, to stop haunting Lake Eola on anniversary nights, to reunite with her sister on the other side. It's a strange gift, being someone's final bridge between life and death. But I'm grateful for it. Grateful that Rachel chose me, trusted me, paid me for a service I didn't know I was providing, and I hope that wherever she is now, whatever form consciousness takes after death, she's at peace. She and Jennifer both, finally having the conversation they should have had 15 years ago, finally free from the grief and regret that kept them trapped. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt the presence of someone who shouldn't be there, or experienced something that defied rational explanation, hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment sharing your encounter with the impossible. Not because I need validation, but because maybe someone else needs to know they're not alone in witnessing the strange spaces where life and death overlap. We're all just trying to make sense of the inexplicable, trying to understand that reality is wider and stranger than we've been taught. Thanks for listening to Rachel's story. Thanks for caring about one lost soul trying to find her way home. And if you ever get a passenger who doesn't show up in your app history, who pays in cash and tells you stories that feel slightly wrong, just listen. Be kind. You might be their last connection to the world they've already left behind.